Ryan Murphy's cinematic universe of killers continues with Monster, the Ed Gein story, and yet again, it's getting quite a lot of negative backlash. People accuse the creators of profiting from real murders, exploiting the pain of victims, and glorifying serial killers. I disagree with these negative takes and have addressed the controversies in the Dahmer and Menendez series in the past, so it looks like I'll get back into it again here. Before I talk about some things I personally loved, let's talk about the pushback. I think the biggest complaints people will have with this one are how transgender people are depicted, how Anthony Perkins was depicted, how they take liberty with the facts, and how they show the influence of his murders throughout the years in popular media and amongst other serial killers. Let's start with the Anthony Perkins inclusion.
Trying to get into character for Psycho. It's part of the biggest shot of my career.
This series depicts Alfred Hitchcock as being shockingly fascinated with Ed Gein's murders and recreates his house how it was found when he was arrested. He then brings Anthony Perkins there to show him the depravity and reveals to him why he chose him specifically for the lead.
Because you alone understand this sickness. You have a secret, Mr. Perkins, don't you?
Well, like you said, we all do.
Don't you?
How is Anthony Perkins similar to a schizophrenic killer? Well, he's a homosexual, duh.
You cocksucker. All you do is suck cocks.
In other news,
Hitchcock explains how Perkins and Gein's secrets that they aren't allowed to share or enact in polite society are what make them both sick. And well, Hitchcock is somewhat right, isn't he? The fact that Perkins isn't able to fully come to terms and publicly live his life as a gay man at the time is causing him discomfort and frustration. Why wouldn't it? Hitchcock is just wrong with creating a parallel to Gein's behavior based on that fact alone.
Gein had a secret. A sexual dysfunction he could not express, and his inability to express his version of the sexual act turned inwards and transformed into sickness.
Yet again, Hitchcock is somewhat right here. Various serial killers have discussed how their urges grew and became more twisted when they were in isolation and felt exiled from others. They talk about how their fantasies became more vivid and their control over sick urges became harder to manage. They mix sexual pleasure with violent fantasies. So I think that many viewers having the gut reaction of feeling like conflating homosexuality to Gein's actions as disgusting and wrong is a good thing. Back in the day, many people would see Hitchcock's words as insightful and true. The very fact that so many people can see those same type of words in the same context that he would have meant them and find them wrong or insensitive shows progress. So why is it offensive to show this? Because in the show he got head in a movie theater while watching his own film? People act weird, and clearly he was going through some stuff mentally, so whether it's true or not, speculation is fine. The mindset that would cause someone in his position to behave that way is interesting and entirely possible. A lot of people didn't even know Anthony Perkins was gay, so 100% truthful or not, the takeaway everyone has is nothing but sympathy for the guy. So from my perspective, I think the biggest problem the show constantly has is that it treats its audience too maturely. And no, I'm not necessarily saying it's too smart for the audience. You know, the Rick and Morty meme of, well, to be fair, one has to have a very high IQ to understand the complexity of blah blah blah. No. What I'm saying is that it presents characters and situations in ways that are nuanced, uncomfortable, and based on real events. People don't give the benefit of the doubt to the creators or see that characters are intentionally flawed, wrong, or presented a certain way and don't have to be taken literally. Spoon-feeding the audience in a manner where it's just a lecture is boring, condescending, and unimaginative. And on a side note, I always thought it was kind of weird that Ryan Murphy is solely hated on by everybody for these. Like, he's the only one responsible for writing every line of dialogue or every character choice. There are dozens of other brilliant creatives that work hard to put this stuff on screen, despite the backlash it continually receives. People are so upset by these shows that it almost feels like they go out of their way to misinterpret and be offended by them. The Monster series trusts the audience to think for themselves and is aware of the current mind frame these shows will be viewed under. They have the rationale to know that not everything presented should be taken at face value. It's not a historically accurate documentary. It's a platform where creatives can express their own ideas in a dramatic way. Like, take the weird voice that so many people seem to not like.
Damn shame. Damn shame.
Well, for one, Hunnam didn't even have access to those short audio recordings until a week before shooting because they're so old and were just kept away. But also, in interviews, Hunnam says that he wanted the voice to feel forced and inauthentic because Gein was a collection of unintegrated things that didn't quite fit. I really like the idea that this character of Ed puts on this performance to be what others think he should.
You only have a relationship with one person, and that person tells you every day that she hates you because you're not a girl. What would that do psychologically and emotionally, and how would that manifest in the body? And so I thought this sort of gentle, high-pitched voice might be a way that Ed, gave permission to his mother to love him.
Segueing into the transgender controversies, if you think that this is how all trans people are just because you see it in horror movies, then you're a fucking idiot.
Transvestite, cannibal, lesbian! Ah!
People often critique these types of shows for glorifying serial killers and encouraging idolization. So shouldn't it follow that it's also possible that seeing these depictions of trans people could lead viewers to admire or empathize with them instead of hating them? How can only one draw idolization, but the other can't? Of course, we have to be aware of how things are presented to an audience, but there's no sure way to control how things are interpreted. Plus, they also show a famous mentally stable depiction of a trans woman who point blank calls Gein out for not being like her.
Ed, I don't think you and I are alike at all. No, not at all. The transsexual is rarely the perpetrator of violence, Mr. Gein. We are far more likely to be the victims of violence. It's violent, Mr. Gein. It's the ultimate way to penetrate a woman, when doing so in the traditional fashion was forbidden by your overbearing mother.
There's infinite responses an audience can have, and the series does a great job at showing various takeaways. Some people are horrified by what Gein did and are sickened by the low depths humanity can sink to. Other killers cite him as something to aspire towards. Others use elements of his crimes to create art that has something meaningful to say about the cultural zeitgeist at the time.
The ugliness, the violence, the cruelty, the depravity, the lies.
And that word, art, is also something that can make people uncomfortable. But this is surely that. I can see why people are offended by using real-life characters and victims, but I honestly think that anything can be offensive if you hone in on it long enough and twist things in the worst way possible. Movies are just people playing pretend, so any murder, or really any bad thing that happens in a movie, can be considered offensive to somebody. This show doesn't glorify serial killers or degrade victims unless that's the way you interpret it, which it seems most people certainly don't. They just worry, or they think that that's what it's trying to do, and so they don't like it. Ultimately, it's up to how you interpret it. So again, I ask, what actual harm is being done by the show existing? So many of you still watch the whole thing and then log it on Letterboxd just to complain about how offensive and unethical it is.
You're the one can't look away.
Were you harmed by it? Are people harmed by how they speculate or imagine aspects of, say, the Bernice character, Adeline, or even Gein himself? The show itself is an adaptation that was inspired by Ed Gein, in the same vein as Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Mindhunter being inspired. I want to be conscious of confirmation bias and echo chambers, but basically everything I see online is people smart enough to not think negatively about the various types of real people portrayed here. People are smart enough to have a sympathetic takeaway on the real-life people the show is based off of, but still don't see the intentional nuance or humanistic themes it's trying to explore. It's either people like me just loving having a new adaptation of something and happy to spend time in that uncomfortable headspace, or people offended and saying it's insensitive. The only tangible negative outcomes of these shows are the interpretations people have of it for a couple weeks before they move on to something else. Even if you're a world-class expert on Gein's life, you still know very little about his subjective mindset or day-to-day life. But to be fair, since I am saying that the takeaway from this show is subjective, it's completely valid for people to have these negative responses. But I don't think they have to be interpreted that way, and I think there's much more valuable ways to view these series. So finally, let's actually talk about some of the stuff that I personally enjoyed. I love that we can find enjoyment and insightful examinations of life from things that were birthed from something so terrible. The Elsa Koch and Holocaust stuff was especially fascinating. With how fast news spreads today, it's wild to think about how people would have been finding out about the Holocaust from newspaper clippings, passed along photos, and rumors. I also really like her interview scene with Ed over the radio and what he imagines she would have said to him. And that sequence of her meeting her demise by the golem of Jewish folklore was spectacular. The song they played for that sequence is called Lacrimosa, and it's also in one of my favorite films of all time, The Tree of Life. The way it was used in that film created not only one of the most powerful movie scenes I've ever seen, but honestly, one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. So hearing that operatic sound incorporated into the series was really amazing to me, and I just loved how it was shot. Another cool moment was the recreation of the Hitchcock shower scene. I love how it mixed modern violence with the censored violence of the past, and how Hitchcock seemed to get off on the audience's disgust and horror with what he was showing. I loved all the scenes that had the film references. Buffalo Bill and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre scenes were so sick. And I thought all the chainsaw kills in this were done really well too, and had excellent gore effects. And no, I don't really care if the real Ed Gein ever used a chainsaw or not. Again, this series itself is an adaptation that's influenced by adaptations that were influenced by Gein. People are so worried about plot accuracy that they don't pay attention to the care put into crafting a multifaceted human. For me, the main part of the whole series that I had mixed thoughts about was how they incorporated Mindhunter into this. When their silhouettes appeared in the hallway, I seriously almost shit myself. Because like many, I've been dying for a season 3. And yeah, I was a little bit let down when I saw that there were alternate versions. But the creators know what they're doing. They're still saying that shows like that are formed and created based off people like Gein.
I chopped up my share of bodies once I heard about the fella in Wisconsin who did it.
Ed Gein.
Yeah, Ed Gein.
So on that note, I think the last place where the show will rub people the wrong way is in the scenes of Gein rolling down the hallway and getting praise from all the other serial killers that would come after him, and showing how he's lived on through popular media. This isn't meant to glorify him. His mother speaking to him and saying she's proud that he's carried on the family name is just a hallucination that he's having. He's trying to cope with how his life has turned out and is just fantasizing about his reputation. Yes, his actions have lived on over 60 years later, but it's not because people are proud of him. It's just a fascination with why he did what he did. One thing that I've really loved about the Monster series is how they humanize their main characters and make you empathize with them to various degrees. One interpretation can be to call that idolization, but I think it's just telling truths about the human condition. What's wrong with feeling sympathy or even empathy with people that commit these types of crimes? I mean, look where we're at today. Tons of people can't even sympathize with their neighbor, much less a serial killer they've never met. So yeah, I won't apologize for wanting to have an understanding for those who are different than me. Monster the Ed Gein story was dope, and I can't wait for the next installment. If there's an element around the ethics of dramatizing true stories in shows like this that you think I glossed over or didn't address, there's a good chance I touched on them in my previous reviews of the Monster series. If I didn't, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching until the end. If you want to support the channel even further, consider joining my Patreon. You can participate in monthly Q&As and get insight into what I'm working on next. And a huge thanks to those of you who are already over there. Thanks for watching my videos.